The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King is the third and final installment in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The film continues the story of the battle against Sauron to save Middle-earth. Sam, Frodo, and Gollum are venturing to Mount Doom, while the rest of the Fellowship, among others, continue fighting the forces of Sauron. As Frodo attempts to traverse perilous areas close to Sauron, the rest of Middle-earth hopes to buy him some time to destroy the ring. Alright, so we're finally here, the final installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy and my final review of that installment. I've said since the beginning that Return of the King has always been my favorite Lord of the Rings film, but I did note that after watching Two Towers, Return of the King would have to be every bit as excellent as I remember it being to top Two Towers. Well, it somehow did it, because Return of the King is an exceptional piece of cinema on every level. It's a film that won 11 Academy Awards for a reason. I don't always like to put a ton of stock into awards, but in this case, I think it's particularly relevant to the conversation at hand because Lord of the Rings is a fantasy film, and we should note just how rare it is for a film like this to receive critical acclaim at the Oscars. Drama films tend to dominate the major categories at the Oscars each year, and I'm still in awe that Return of the King swept the Oscars like it did. Now that I've seen it again, I understand it though. This film does so many things right and holds up nearly 20 years later exceedingly well. The biggest thing Return of the King does well is that it provides a satisfying conclusion, some would say multiple conclusions, to a grand story with a bevy of compelling characters. I'm not really in the camp that feels that Return of the King has too many endings. I feel that each scene at the end of the film was necessary. We needed to see everyone reunite, Aragorn take his rightful place as king, the hobbits saying goodbye to Frodo, and Sam going back to his life in the Shire. These are all things I felt were necessary to make the story feel complete. I mean, everything is wrapped up with a nice bow on it, and I love that about it. Return of the King is easily the most emotional Lord of the Rings film, and that's by its very nature. I mean, it's full of payoff to the three-film adventure these characters have gone on, and not only that, but the growth they've experienced along the way, it allows them to develop in satisfying ways. These characters all undergo growth, most of them significant, but they're all fundamentally changed in one way or another by the end of the film. What I also love is that the characters challenge one another. Anytime you're adventuring with characters for long periods of time, there needs to be ups and downs along the way, particularly in how those characters interact with one another. There needs to be conflict, disagreement, ways in which they develop alongside one another because of the obstacles they must endure and overcome. This is something Return of the King does very effectively. Sam, Frodo, and Gollum particularly so. This trio was full of conflict and drama, and I loved it because it always added so much suspense to the journey and drama, of course, and also emotional satisfaction to Sam and Frodo's eventual triumph. What you've been through in the ups and downs with the characters, you can emotionally connect with them more because of it. And it's so easy with the characters to connect to them in Return of the King as compared to the other Lord of the Rings films, which you totally can, but Return of the King provides that satisfying payoff to the journey for a lot of them. I find, overall though, that each of the three films is paced super well, but Return of the King really progresses quite beautifully. There's plenty of action and spectacle to satisfy, but there's also a lot of really great moments in between. The way in which the characters converse with one another is super engaging through and through. Every conversation leads to a progression of the plot, whether it be battle strategy, making sense of the journey, or anything else in between. I think Return of the King does this even better than Fellowship, which I would say has some of the best dialogue-heavy scenes in the entire trilogy. But one of the major reasons we love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, of course, is the massive battles. Return of the King delivers outstanding spectacle on the same level of Two Towers. I would say the two films are basically neck and neck when it comes to action. These scenes are some of the best battle sequences I've ever seen put to film. While Return of the King doesn't quite have a Helm's Deep level battle, the totality of the action sequences make the two even for me. Mostly because the battle for Minas Tirith is just barely below the Battle of Helm's Deep for me. That battle is incredible and again features highs and lows for both sides, making it feel like a constant tug of war. I think another one of the things we'll look back on and remember fondly about the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the score. The music composed for this film is incredible and has become even more iconic and recognizable over time. It just lends itself consistently to the feelings of adventure, despair, and triumph. This is the perfect score to accentuate the emotional beats of this story, and it's more important than most of us realize in the moment. Return of the King is ultimately my favorite Lord of the Rings film because of the emotion behind it. Its action is on par with Two Towers, but its finale is incredibly satisfying. For me, it's so hard to choose between these two films, Two Towers and Return of the King. It's like picking between your favorite kid, but I do know that Return of the King, its emotion, it really gets me. I didn't know that a movie about orcs and wizards and a ring and hobbits could move you so thoroughly, but Lord of the Rings is a special breed of film. Return of the King is a masterpiece for multiple reasons, and it stands atop the fantasy genre for all of those reasons. As for the pros cons, for the pros, Return of the King delivers excellent drama, beautifully done battle sequences, an excellent score, and a satisfying and emotional ending. I don't have a single con for this film because I think this movie is executed to perfection. So Return of the King gets a predictable 10 out of 10 for me. It's an absolute must-see. So I hope you guys enjoyed my reviews of the Lord of the Rings films as much as I did making them. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on the trilogy in the comments below, and of course your favorite film of the three so we can discuss that. I loved each one so much that I actually went and destroyed my bank account with a pre-order of the Prime 1/4 scale Sauron piece. If you haven't seen that piece, you're not a collector yet, please look it up and see how beautiful it is. I needed something to represent my love for the Lord of the Rings in my collection, so Sauron just seemed like the natural choice. But that's all for now though. This is WillFoxification signing off, and I will see you in the next review.